Hey everybody, today we are doing another topic video. Today we are going to be discussing movies that you were really excited about. There was a lot of hype and then you saw it and you were disappointed by it. As always, before we start, I'm going to plug my website. It is deepfocuslens.com. If you're interested in art, I am an artist and I do commission portraits and I sell some prints of my work. So if you're interested, you can go to the shop, or if you have questions about a commission, you can email me. The email is in the description box below and I'm happy to talk with you. But yes, let's just go ahead and start with it. The first one is Psycho. If the film had ended at the shower scene, it would easily be one of my favorite horror films, but the second half just doesn't work for me. It was cool to see the mystery behind it, but really wasn't necessary or needed. The film would have been better and more frightening without it. I agree with a lot of what you're saying here. Not all of it, but I think the majority of it I do. Yes, without a question, the first half of Psycho is unbelievably good. It is near perfect. It's some of the most meticulous suspense that I have ever seen from Alfred Hitchcock, which is really saying something. And personally, I love the idea of the main character dying in the middle of the film. I think that's brilliant. That is really hard to do for writers, you know, even great writers, when you have a character that you followed for every moment of the film and then suddenly you're asked to care about other people that you have built no relationship with. And yes, unfortunately, a lot of that suspense and what makes Psycho so auteur, so distinct, is not really as present in the second half, and the characters aren't as interesting in the second half. It's just not as strong as the first half. I know that the writer of Psycho did talk about how he had some scenes here and there planted in the second half where it really helps you to get to know Marion's sister a little bit more, and, you know, the fiance. He kind of talks about them in the making of on the DVD or something, and I thought, oh, that would have been great. I think we really could have benefited from that as audience members, but, you know, I think they had to cut it for time. And of course, the final scene in Psycho, I hate it. I think it is so dated, how they're, you know, spoon-feeding us the information about mental health as it might have seemed in the 1960s. It's just awful. It's insulting. I do think the second half is important because I love the idea of using that MacGuffin of the money and then realizing that, no, it's a red herring. I think that is a brilliant subversion of expectations. Yes, we see a bit of that in the first half, but I like the way that they follow through with it, where they're actually going, thinking that these people want this money when they have no idea about it. So yeah, it's the unevenness of it that I think isn't talked about that much. Psycho is always regarded as this great kind of perfect masterpiece, and I don't think it's perfect, and I agree. I think that if the second half were as good or even close to as good, it would be one of my favorite horror films as well. Joker. To be honest, my expectations were somehow skeptical. It was a superhero movie after all, but the hype around this film was so big that I couldn't help but being disappointed. The film wasn't bad, but it was trying so hard to be something way out of its league that this ambition and the hype just flattened the experience for me. Yeah, I think I agree with the majority of this. I mean, the Joker is a beloved character in the Rogues Gallery, and was one of my favorite characters for sure. I was obsessed when I was, you know, a kid and a teenager, all of that. And I always figured that eventually they would do an origin story. I don't know if that's necessary, but I figured that they would do it. And I think there are ways of making it very good. And I felt this one just was a little bit second rate. I agree with you. It's trying very hard to be something that is way out of its league, you know, trying to go for, you know, that, like I said when I talked about it, mid-70s, late 70s, even early 80s kind of film school brat films like Scorsese-esque, but nowhere nearly on the same level, so it just kind of comes off as second rate. It's like I, Tonya. That film came off as like a second-rate version of Goodfellas, but set to figure skating. Thematically just kind of watered down, very repetitive, and everything felt one note. I will say, though, there is one scene that completely exceeded my expectations, and I wish I had talked about this in the review. It's the scene, of course, with Murray, that big, famous climactic sequence. That is done so well. The tension is unnerving. It might be one of the most haunting scenes I've ever seen depicting the Joker in pop culture, which is saying a lot because there are a million different renditions of him. And though I was not crazy about Joaquin Phoenix's performance overall, I loved it in this scene. But unfortunately, that's really the only scene that compelled me to a great degree. But otherwise, yeah, I think it was just kind of a slog to get through. But that was just, you know, for me personally. The Force Awakens. I thought I was getting a continuation of the Star Wars saga. Instead, I was so disappointed I got a soft reboot, a remake of the original trilogy. Right there and then, I knew the entire sequel trilogy was going to be remakes of the original trilogy, and I indeed turned out to be right. And it had a Mary Sue as the lead. Well, I mean, I'm amazed that people had expectations that were otherwise. In this day and age, you can't make something or remake something, do a franchise like Star Wars without basically recreating the same thing. We have to play it so safe in Hollywood because now we're more afraid of our audience rather than challenging the mediums, I think. And yeah, of course it was soft. You know, like, you can say what you will about the Star Wars prequels. Yeah, they suck. Of course they do. But at least they were distinguishable from the original trilogy. They had their own aesthetic. They had, you know, a completely different look. You have to give George Lucas credit for that, for actually, you know, putting some creativity into it. In a way, I do kind of respect them more than something like The Force Awakens, which again, yeah, just recycles the entire trilogy and recycles all of the same character archetypes to the point where it's a little bit ridiculous. And I get just really annoyed by a lot of like nudges to the audience that reminds us of nostalgia. Yes, I know Star Wars was never really original. It is, you know, recycled ideas that we have seen before. But, you know, the original film had a lot of passion, and the way that they packaged it had never been done before in this way. And it changed the way movies were made. It was a huge risk, and it was an independent film that did spectacular business. And now these are just cold corporate products just shoved out on an assembly line that are just, you know, too afraid to ruffle feathers, too afraid to be different in any sort of way. And it shoves political propaganda down your throat. And it's not even cleverly implemented into the story, into the writing. You mentioned a Mary Sue. Yes, you know, our main character Rey has to be this I'm girl power badass, and just shoving that in our throats, down our throats all the time. My favorite line in The Force Awakens is where she says, I don't need you to hold my hand. It's like, yes, we get it. You're an independent woman. It would be a lot less condescending if she could be a really tough woman who also had flaws, who was also compelling, who was also complex in certain ways. But no, you've got to pander to everyone. I have not seen all of the new Star Wars films. I think I've only seen The Force Awakens and then the one that came after it. I don't even remember what it is. But yeah, just, it's completely forgettable. You know, obviously a lot went into it, a lot of money and a lot of effort, but, you know, for what? Really just to kind of recreate something in a way that shows how much our world has changed, and in a way where we really can't allow for great creativity and individuality anymore in the mainstream. And I just think that's really sad. The 2012 Les Miserables, 14-year-old me was craving a modern musical. So when I saw the trailer for it, I was beyond hyped. I bought the biggest popcorn and I sat down only to witness the biggest mess I had seen in a long time. I actually went to see it again because I couldn't believe what I saw the first time around. Why would you see that a second time? Genuine question. That movie is like 3 hours and it is the most muddled slog. It is just, blech. It makes you feel unclean. It makes you feel depressed. After I watched that movie, you should have seen the look on my face. I hate Les Miserables. I hate it so much. Everyone knows on here that I'm a huge musical person, though I'm less a fan of the kind of like 1980s, more like pop opera musicals like Phantom of the Opera and such. So I'm less a fan of Les Miserables, but just this film, Tom Hooper is not a very good director. He makes films that are very arty for the sake of being arty and really just kind of wringing the emotion out of every possible scene with no depth, with no interesting compositions, nothing that really breaks up the monotony of that emotion. So all you get is just gut-wrenching pain all the time. Wide-angle lenses, shots that are all really, really close up to people's faces, because it doesn't know how to gain pathos in an artistic way other than that. Everything is quite literally in your face. It's emotion for the sake of Academy Awards. It is pompous. It is everything that I can't stand about these kinds of movies. I think this is one of the biggest clusterfucks, big Hollywood clusterfucks of its time. And I think it really did a disservice to the Hollywood musicals. And I argue it's worse than Cats. Tom Hooper did Cats. Later on, no, actually that one, it didn't offend me nearly as much. It was really, really bad, but it didn't make me feel bad about the world. It didn't make me feel kind of gross inside, but Les Mis made me feel gross. The Suspiria remake. While I found the story to be a clear upgrade visually, I thought it was very boring and uninteresting. The cinematography of the original is what made it interesting to me, and I just wish the remake had been a little more unique in that regard. Yeah, so I don't like the remake either, and I think that's a controversial opinion, but whatever. Yeah, you know, when it comes to remakes, I will give the Suspiria remake credit for they did try to be different. They went for a completely different sort of interpretation. You have to appreciate that. Now, did they succeed? No. I think the problem with movies today is that we're less comfortable with less is more. We feel like we have to explain everything. And I feel like this sort of story is better the less you know. The more that it is interpreted visually, I think makes it more interesting. So it really kind of focuses more on the imagery and the tone of it. I actually think that the original could benefit from a little bit more depth, at least adding more of the ideas, the thematic ideas into the composition, into the imagery in a way that gave it a little bit more breadth. I think they could have benefited from that, but I think that this film took it way too far, to the point where it just got really muddled, clunky, and it was kind of weighted down by kind of the ideas and the explanations. It lacked all of the tension, the surrealism, the strangeness, and it's going more for like a body horror thing, but yet I never felt it. It always felt very removed, very cold, rather than something where I felt the sweat and the blood and the flesh. It has been a long time since I saw that film, but from what I remember, it was just a mess, and it was just all over the place. And there's something about kind of the stark contrast of the images that you remember in Suspiria that I think are more powerful. Sometimes less can be more. I like the innocent sort of Alice in Wonderland through the looking glass quality that the original has. And yeah, I love Tom York too, but sorry, when it comes to composition, when it comes to instrumentals and things like that, Johnny Greenwood is your man. Tom's score was so muted, and the grays and everything in the film were so muted that it just all blends together and everything felt flat rather than coming to life in the way that you want a film like that too. But yeah, that is the video. Thank you guys so much for responding. I love hearing your answers as always. Here are my Patreon supporters. You guys are wonderful as always. I appreciate your support so much. If you're interested in becoming a patron, the link for that is below, as well as all of my social media information. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.